starting for the night. So first, good evening and welcome to Candidates Night. Thank you to the audience members who are attending in person, those watching remotely, and all the candidates who are here tonight. Our goal tonight is to create a safe, fair place for voters and candidates to have direct, face-to-face interactions on issues that are important to the voters and the candidates. The candidates were invited to attend tonight's event via multiple emails, as well as follow-up phone calls to any candidate who did not respond to the invite. Any candidate who's unable to attend was provided the opportunity to provide a short written statement that I would read later tonight, or to send a representative on their behalf. The format of tonight's event will start with my introductions, a then update about the ballot from our town moderator, Randy Walker. We'll then have short introductions from each candidate, and then we'll move to the question and answer section. I am Caitlin Purdy Murphy, the moderator. I apologize for not starting with that. For the part of the question and answer section, I will read each question and then identify which candidate will start with answering the question. If a question is written specifically to one individual, every candidate that's running for that race will have the opportunity to answer that question. If an audience member here tonight would like to ask a question, there are note cards and pens around the room where you can write down your question. I do want to clarify that if the question that you write down is either a duplicate or it's inappropriate or unfair, the question will not be read. Also, any question that's provided tonight that we do not have time for, we will provide those questions to the candidates so that they have an opportunity to address your concerns in a format that they choose. So to establish this safe and fair environment, I'm going to set up the following ground rules, which may be amended if needed. First, all individuals, including how you write your questions, need to be complete with respect. There should be no rude or derogatory statements. Second, candidates, please do not interrupt each other, and please stop speaking when your time has expired. And finally, let's have fun and let's ask questions that we're concerned about tonight. Thank you. Randy, the microphone is all yours.
I just have one procedural issue, and it's on the ballot in the state representative, Carroll, District 6. And Kayla Hewitt is listed as running under other candidates and Democratic candidates. And for those of you that are inclined to vote for her, can absolutely vote once. The rule is always you can only vote for one person once in a race. So in that race, you can vote for either Kayla Hewitt or Karen Burnett Curry or John T. McDonald or Katie, but you cannot vote for two people. Even though it's a vote for two, you can't take two of those and vote for the same person. So you can't vote for Kayla as a other candidate or Democratic candidate. Similarly, you couldn't vote for, say, John McDonald and then do a write-in for John so that they get two. So just to clarify that, a number of people have asked in that vote for two race, can we vote for the same person twice? The answer has always been no. That's been the rule, and you can only vote once. So that's my quick procedural comment. Kate?
All right, thanks, Randy. All right, we will now begin with candidate introductions, for which 3 minutes per candidate has been allocated. Again, any candidate that was unable to attend may submit a written introduction, which the moderator will read, me, or send a representative on their behalf. So to start, the first introduction will be Emmett Soldati.
Are we up there? We just sit.
Just from your seat.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Emmett Soldati. I'm running for Executive Council in District 1. That district goes from Durham up to the Canadian border. I hail from Somersworth. I was born and raised there. And after college, 3 things happened in my life. 1, I got sober. The second is I moved to my hometown of Somersworth. And the third is I opened a business, a restaurant in my downtown, because I really believed that bringing the community together on our main street would help us solve a lot of problems. And the New Hampshire that I returned to after college was very different than the New Hampshire that my father, Lincoln, had served his community in as mayor and county attorney. We had a growing housing crisis. The hospital that I and my siblings were born at was, the maternity ward was shuttered because a corporation had taken over. My local public school, where I went to elementary school with my siblings and even my grandfather went to, was also closed because of an education funding crisis that the community could not find the funding to solve. And of course, there was a growing substance use crisis that felt like it was outpacing a lot of efforts on the ground. And so I have spent my career as a business owner and an entrepreneur working on our main streets, really seeing what our generation and the next generation is facing. And I want to make sure that we deliver and fulfill the promise for the next generation to be able to not only survive in New Hampshire and thrive. And now I'm running for the Executive Council, which is the second highest seat in our state government. It is unique in New Hampshire. We are the only one with such an authority and that can provide a powerful check on the governor and also make sure that the agenda that serves Grand Estaters is being met, whether it's through the contracts that we sign, the judges we put on our Supreme Court, to the heads of every agency and commission. That is the charter of our Executive Council. In my time as a small business owner, I do have a track record of taking on large corporations. When HCA tried to close the maternity ward at Frisbee Hospital, I challenged it and I got the Attorney General's office involved. I delayed that closure and secured $2 million for maternal health in Stratford County. When Facebook deleted my business's Instagram account, I took them to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and without the representation of a lawyer, I won that case, setting a new precedent against that powerful social media conglomerate. Many people at the time told me to sit down, that it was unwinnable, but I stood up. And I think it's time we have someone in the Executive Council that represents the needs of this and the next generation that is going to stand up for you and your rights. I hope to earn your vote on November 5th.
Thank you. Our next candidate introduction will be Joseph D. Kenny, whose representative will provide his introduction on his behalf.
Thank you, Caitlin. My name is Sean Coop. I'm a resident of Wolfeboro and a small business owner. I'm here to speak on behalf of Joan Kenny that had a previously scheduled meeting in Rollinsford tonight. I thank you all for being here. As Joe says, go forward. Dear Wolfeboro and Tuftonville voters, there's a great regret that I'm unable to be with you this evening. Let me start by saying that we live in the best state in the country, having served in 3 separate tours in war zones over my career. In the Marine Corps, there was no place like home. Wolfeboro is my second home. For 9 summers, I worked at Pierce Camp Birchmont on Lake Wentworth during my high school and college years. I have fond memories going back to Hats of the Air, Father's, John's Pub, Bailey's Ice Cream, and Fun Spot in Wolfeboro. While these places have different names today, these memories still exist in my mind. In the past, I served all of you as state senator for 6 years, 8 years on the Carroll County delegation, and 4-time House member. I am seeking the your sixth term as your executive counselor. The council has 3 major functions. 1, vote on all contracts that are $10,000 or more. Secondly, vote on all state boards and commissions. And lastly, to vote on all judicial nominees. Another important role the council oversees is the oversight of 10-year highway improvement plan. In the past, I have conducted 8 to 10 public hearings throughout the district to discuss our transportation needs. I have 1 such hearing in Wolfeboro last year. In the past 2 years, we have confirmed over 25 judges, a role I take quite seriously. One of those judicial confirmations was Betsy Payne of Sandwich. State government has been fortunate to receive, this state government has been fortunate to receive American Rescue Plan's funding of up to this date $990 million over the past 3 years. We have invested in our roads and bridges, school system, nursing homes, broadband, mental health facilities, water and sewage systems. Invest in New Hampshire in housing programs, school safety infrastructure, fish hatcheries, northern border communication upgrades, and various communication grants. In regard to local issues, I have supported funding and permitting to the Union Wharf and Wolfeboro, our senior meals contracts, veteran issues, funding for local watershed groups, bacteria funding for our lakes, and support to our local roads and bridges. With inflation and the high cost of living, many of our state capital road and bridge projects have increased in costs to include labor, materials, and various services. Additionally, our workforce throughout New Hampshire has placed increased demands on access to housing and childcare. We are short of nurses, trade workers, and educators. In the coming year, our challenge will be recruitment and retention of these professional workers statewide. In September, the state revenue was down to $27.9 million. Thanks. Much of this is attributed to a shortfall in the business and tax revenue. Lastly, I love my job. I do it full-time, not part-time. I have a 100% attendance record at all my required meetings. Each year, I put 60,000 miles in my car, traveling from Pittsburgh all the way to the southern part of my district. I thank you for your support. I look forward to having your support in the future. Sincerely, Joe Kenny.
Thank you. And our next introduction will be Dr. Bill Marsh.
Thank you very much. I think many people here know me, but for those who don't, I'm Bill Marsh. My wife, who's in the back row there, and I came to Wolfeboro back in 1986. That's a long time ago. And we've been happy to be part of this community ever since then. Raised 5 children here. I hung up my shingle and practiced ophthalmology here for 30 years. Some of you may remember the office right by the blinking light on the top of the hill. Practiced at Huggins Hospital for 30 years. I also was on the board of trustees for 18 years, and for 10 years was the treasurer. I joined that position at a very difficult time for Huggins Hospital, and I'm proud of the fact that we've turned that hospital around, and it's open and independent when so many things have happened at Lakes Region and at Frisbee around us. I've done other things for the community, served as the moderator of the town of Brookfield for 12 years. Randy and I used to have a good time with that. And I was the health officer of Brookfield for 20 years. They had to hire a couple people to take my place when I gave that one up. After retirement, I went to the State House and represented Carroll County 8 for 6 years. Many people thought I represented Wolfeboro, but I didn't. It was the 8 towns around Wolfeboro, and had a very good time. We passed a lot of bills, mostly healthcare bills. During my last 4 years, I managed to pass more things into law than any other representative in the State House. And I did that by working with both sides, trying to reach compromises in a bipartisan fashion. Some of those are really important things, like we got birth control pills behind the counter. Well, the telemedicine bill started as a way to get less expensive substance use treatment to our county jail and save the taxpayers money, but it grew and grew as we found more ways of using that. And now it saves lives with telemedicine and telestroke programs. And I will be happy to yield the rest of my time so that we have more time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marsh. Our next introduction will be Kayla Hewitt.
Hi, my name is Kayla Hewitt. My maiden name is Kayla Wood, as some of you know me. I grew up here in Wolfeboro, and I am running for state representative in District 6, so that's to represent the towns of Wolfeboro and Tuftonboro. So I grew up here and graduated from Kingswood in 2006, and after my husband and I got married and moved around following his assignments in the Navy and then his civilian career, we had an opportunity and he said, all right, if you can go anywhere, where do you want to go? And I said, take me home. So we moved back with our 4 children to Wolfeboro about 4 years ago. And I wanted to come back here because my childhood here was special. And I know it was special. It's beautiful, yes. And of course, we swam in the lakes and loved the lakes. And that actually made it very special. The thing that made it the most was the people. It was going to the dump with my dad on Saturday and stopping at Christie's for donuts while he got a cup of coffee and chatted with his friends. It was walking down the street and seeing familiar faces, going to community functions. A lot of you in this room grew up as I grew up with you as adults who I looked up to, and it's really comforting to see those same faces. And now I'm grateful to say that our children get to be the 4th generation in my family who get to be raised in this community. So I'm running as an independent candidate, and it's authentic to me. I feel as though we're in a time of quite political divide and divisiveness. And I want to run and offer you an alternative, which is unity, especially here at our local level. We're the ones who sustain each other's businesses through the cold winter months when the summer tourists go home. We're the ones who help each other when our neighbor is grieving and we do what we can to be there for them. We're the ones who make this community what it is, and you are the ones who make this community what it is. I know we're here tonight for political reasons, but first and foremost, to me, We're all human. And to me, that is the most important connection that we all share. I support your individual rights and your freedom as long as it doesn't infringe on the person next to you. And I believe we all have a seat at the table so long as we come with kindness and respect for our neighbor who is next to us. I think that's the only way to solve problems, and that's why I'm here as an independent. I thank you to all of you who wrote me in on both ballots, Republican and Democrat, which is how I ended up in the Democratic column as a nominee. I am independent and staying independent, but I promise you, if you vote for me, I will work to unify our community and solve the problems that you bring to me. I want to represent you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Karen Burnett Curry.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Karen Burnett Curie, and I too am running in District 6 for the New Hampshire House. I'm running as a Democrat, have been an independent all my life, but went in and registered as a Democrat in April, and have enjoyed working with Democratic committee here in Wolfeboro on my candidacy. I have been coming to Tuftonboro all my life. So my grandparents both had summer cottages on Wabeek Shore, right down below Abenaki Tower, for all of those who've climbed Abenaki Tower. And so I was a Navy brat, and this was my home base. We came here every summer. I went to summer camp in Ossipee. My brothers went to summer camp at Belknap. We spent our summers enjoying New Hampshire. So when I got old enough to decide where I wanted to go, when I went to college, I came to UNH. And a couple of years later, I got my graduate degree in environmental science and teaching at Antioch, New England, and Keene, New Hampshire. From there, I've done a variety of educational and nonprofit administration, grants management, jobs throughout New Hampshire and into Vermont and Massachusetts, I admit, but I have always been close enough since I graduated to be spending my summers in Tuftonboro. And then when I took a job as the first executive director of the Lake Wentworth Foundation, which is now the Wentworth Watershed Association, I became a winter resident of Wolfeboro. So I'm a snowbird. I spent summers in Tuftonboro and winters in Wolfeboro. And I was drawn to running for office by the fact that I was increasingly dismayed at legislation that was being proposed and passed, particularly related to education and undermining the constitutional restrictions on what money that education money should be spent on. Also, the state not meeting its constitutional obligation to fund education after 40 years. Been here long enough to remember the first Claremont decision, and we still are in the same conundrum. So then I decided that after watching Katie, one of the people who's present incumbent, propose a ban on abortions at the point of fetal heartbeat, and to propose bans on access to medical abortions, pharmaceutical abortions, and a variety of other things, I became even more alarmed at the loss of freedoms for women. And so I am looking forward to serving the town of Wolfeboro and Tuftonboro as your representative. And my name again is Karen Burnett Curie.
Thank you. I will now read a statement from candidate John T. McDonald. It's fairly long, so I'll do my best to get through all of it, but I will stop when the time has expired. Unfortunately, I will not be attending this evening's forum. I want to thank the moderator for reading the below statement concerning my candidacy. I've lived in Wolfeboro for over 60 years. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from St. Anselm College and a law degree from Massachusetts School of Law. I retired from the New Hampshire State Police as a detective after a 30-year career in New Hampshire law enforcement. I am proud of my long career in law enforcement and am honored to be recognized by so many great organizations in our state. I received the Law Enforcement Officer of the Year from the Laconia Elks and the U.S. Marine Corps League Distinguished Service Award with a bronze medal, a Medal of Honor for Heroism from the New Hampshire Sunday News Union Leader newspaper, and the Everyday Hero Award from the Carroll County Child Advocacy Center. I have served as a member of the Wolfeboro Budget Committee for over 30 years, currently serving as chairman. I serve as the clerk of the New Hampshire House Committee on Municipal and County Government. I have been a member of the committee since being elected to the New Hampshire House of Representatives 3 terms ago. It is the duty of my committee to, quote, to consider all matters pertaining to town, city, and county officers, changes in municipal and county government, the boundary lines of towns, cities, and counties, the creation of new towns, cities, and counties, local revenue, including fees, property taxes, and exemptions, and such other matters as may be referred to, end quote. New Hampshire's lack of broad-based tax is critical to keeping our economy competitive. I'll continue to oppose the repeated attempts to pass an income or sales tax by my Democratic colleagues. I will oppose any change in the funding of education that returns the donor town tax system. The communities of Wolfeboro and Tuftonboro both belong to a coalition of New Hampshire towns who oppose the return of donor towns. The return of donor towns would cost the residents of Wolfeboro and Tuftonboro between $1 and $1.5 million. I will sponsor, co-sponsor, and support common sense legislation that protects one of our most valuable assets, our lakes, rivers, and drinking water. On the ongoing problem which is affecting the health of our lakes and ponds is cyanobacteria. The health of all water is a bipartisan issue. I will continue to work across the aisle with my Democratic colleagues on legislation that will best address the problem. I've co-sponsored legislation across the aisle with my Democratic colleagues, such as Representative Rosemarie Rung. One such bill was titled Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund. Senator Bradley worked to include $1 million for that purpose in the state budget. The following year, an additional $1 million was added to it for a total of $2 million. We are also sponsoring a bill that would create a lake plate, which hopefully will be as successful as the moose plate. This additional revenue from the sales of the lake plate will be used to make the previous mentioned line items self-funding and will serve as a non-tax revenue source. I will oppose legislation that will cause harm to our lakes and the safety of its many users. Working with legislative colleagues, concerning citizens, and numerous Lake Association partners, we were able to stop a bill that would have allowed outright overnight mooring on all of New Hampshire's lakes and ponds and making an unnecessary change to the current speed limit on Lake Winnipesaukee. I will continue to support efforts to ensure that there is necessary funding to respond to PFAS issues. I hope to earn your vote and support for my re-election as your state representative. It is my honor to be your voice in Concord. Thank you. And our next candidate will be Bobby Budman.
So I just want to start off by saying democracy dies in a vacuum. When we cannot ask our representation how they are representing us, when we cannot redress them, when we do not have them in the room, that is highly problematic. I would like all of you to look at this table and notice who is missing from this table. It is our incumbents. That is troublesome. I came here to learn about my representation. I didn't just come here so you could ask me questions to see how I would represent you. Okay, got that out. Had to get that out first. I used to exist in a vacuum, and then the pandemic hit, and I started attending our school board meetings. And at our school board meetings, this gentleman walked up, and he had a name tag on, and it said Representative Cordelli on it. And he was very negative, and he was very hyperbolic towards our school board. And the things he was saying were highly troubling to me. So I went home, and I did the Google, and I found out this representative was one town over, and he was representing Tuftonboro and Moultonboro and a few other towns. And that year, we redistricted, and Mr. Cordelli then became my representative. And I realized the only way to change what Mr. Cordelli was doing was to run against him. Now, I always say, to get the introverts up out of their house to stand up and to run for office, you have to be doing something wrong. So let me tell you what Mr. Cordelli is doing wrong. First, Mr. Cordelli has tried to dissolve our school district. If he dissolves our school district, Wolfeboro taxes will go up because we have to buy a full Kingswood complex. We have to buy all the other towns out. The other towns in the district then have no middle school, no high school, no tech center. They have no art center. On top of it, Mr. Cordelli is the architect of bringing school vouchers to our community. 30 seconds, got it. Wow, I have a lot to say in 30 seconds. I'll just quickly go. Mr. Cordelli is the school vouchers that are overtaxing us. He's part of destroying adequate funding in education, which right now, last year, we got $9,080,000. That will be a burden on the taxpayers. He wrote the book ban. I wrote the anti-book ban. He did the divisive concepts that has us in court right now that we're spending a lot of money. Thanks. Bobby Budman, thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Wharton Sinclair.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I'm Wharton Sinclair. I live in Sandwich. I'm a retired engineer. I spent most of my career in research and development in a large American corporation. I want to talk first a little bit about what the County Commission is and does. We're quite different from the legislators that you send to Concord. We are really managers of the county facilities in Ossipee. That includes the Mountain View home. It includes the sheriff's office, the jail, and the county farm, and the attorney's office. So these are all critical services for our county. And the job of county commissioner is to manage and oversee these facilities and the services they provide as efficiently and provide as high quality services as possible to the residents of Carroll County. So that's really about what this is, and I'm excited to serve the citizens of Carroll County and do my honest best to manage these facilities to your benefit, and I promise you I will work hard at that and be as fair as possible in my approach. I'm also motivated by what I see as some opportunities at the county complex that I think have been overlooked. One of them I brought to the current county commission's attention a couple of years ago, and that is the potential of installing a solar array at the county complex. This could save money. It's quite effective. We spend over $300,000 a year on electricity, so that's a significant saving for the county. Of course, the county commission never acted on that, although they were very thankful to me for coming and bringing it to their attention. They proceeded in the aftermath to sign a contract with their utility, which would actually involve penalties if they were to take the step of installing solar. So I think there's some change in leadership is due at the county commission. So that's one of the ideas that I would like to pursue. There have been other problems that have involved the Mountain View Community Nursing Home and staffing there, which has run into a lot of costs due to agency staffing. And that's something I have some ideas about how to address, and certainly we'll be looking for help with that. And that's really all that I have time for right now, but thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you consider voting for me on November 5th.
Thank you. And our next candidate will be Dwight Dvork.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm a local Wolfeboro boy myself, born and raised here, so no one can claim that they've been here much longer than me. I'm here today to announce my candidacy for the county commissioner also for District 3, which is Wolfeboro, Wolfeboro, Brookfield, Wakefield, and Effingham and Freedom. I am an independent candidate and appear on the official ballot as an independent. All county voters must vote for 3 county commissioners this year for each district. There are 3 districts, and this is District 3. So you will be voting for 3 different districts, not just Wolfeboro. Okay, please remember to vote the whole ballot in the November general election. It is critical for all candidates to receive your vote on the ballot. During the primary, there are many down votes, which means the voter did not complete the choices for some candidate categories, such as county commissioner or executive council, and this left some candidates with insufficient votes to make it to the general election, sadly. I was educated locally at Kingswood High School and then later obtained an English degree from UNH. Although I have attended other colleges, I am grateful for the excellent primary and secondary schooling I had received locally and the preparation it gave me for higher studies and work achievements. I've spent most of my working years as an owner of an insurance agency here in Wolfeboro and as a husband to my wife Alita, a talented artist, and as a father to my very musically talented daughter Asia, who is disabled and lives with us. I have been a landlord of several apartments in Wolfeboro and Plymouth, and have been a Wolfeboro selectman as well. I was the original chairman of the Wolfeboro Town Hall Restoration Committee and worked for 3 years on all aspects of this restoration and the funding of the project. I am used to working in local settings in a bipartisan way, and not every issue is black and white, and I have learned to listen carefully to those who have serious issues or needs. I urge you to vote this November for myself, Wharton Sinclair, and Susan Ticehurst in District 2. Wharton's in District 1. There are 3 votes needed, 1 for each district. The county commissioners need some new blood. We are in favor of better transparency in county government actions, working to restore the Mountain Valley Community Home to its previous 5-star rating, and revisiting the usage options for county-owned forest land and agricultural land. Restoring the greenhouse for year-round food production, working to make the county complex as energy efficient as possible, and overseeing the decisions needed to spend $8 million received from COVID funding on the renovation of the county annex building, which is still yet in formation stages. I look forward to being of service to the Carroll County residents, the businesses and social programs that make up our population. I pledge to work to keep our county fiscally responsible. Thank you very much for your vote.
And our final introduction of the night is Susan Ticehurst.
How about Kathy Dragonfly?
I'm sorry, Catherine S. Dragonfly. I apologize.
That's okay. I've been called worse. Dwight is my friend. One night we were at dinner at his house, and we were talking about politics and knew that there would be 3 seats coming up for the Carroll County Commissioner. Dwight and I said, great, we could have 2 of those 3 seats and we could swing it to the Democratic side. Well, didn't we know there was all sorts of snags in that process. And I tried to get my name off the ballot. That wasn't working. The upper Democratic Party, the leaders of the party, tried to get me to call my doctor and tell them I had a physical or mentally disabled reason I couldn't run, and I was not willing to put that information on my medical record. So I decided to do nothing. The Democrats, I left, I went out to Chicago, I volunteered at the DNC. I came back to find that the upper echelon of the Democrats had created a very significant marketing plan for Dwight, Susan, and Wharton. So I acquiesced and I said, okay, fine, Dwight is a good guy, he will do a good job, I really want to travel, we'll let Dwight run. Well, then, after all the ads, all the press releases, all the conversations, all the radio interviews, the TV interviews, the banners, everything, I still won. I won 14 of the 19 towns in the county. So then I thought, well, maybe they do want me. So I think our county desperately needs more transparency and balanced decisions. We have not had a Democrat on the Carroll County Commissioners Board for 12 years. 12 years we have been run by Republicans doing whatever they want because they don't have to talk in front of us. We have 3 minutes each to discuss things, and it's just not enough to get things where we should be, where we are not paying $1 million a year in interest. So I will close by this one little paragraph. I sat down to write my bio, and I didn't really know who I was, so there are a lot of choices. So I am a frugal Yankee. Some people call me cheap. Mother, daughter, niece, friend, freelance writer, antiquarian, volunteer, marijuana advocate, political junkie, social media geek, semi-retired, and ready to serve.
Thank you. We'll now transition to the question and answer portion of tonight. So if you have a question, the high school students around here have cards that you can write your question down. Please flag them. They'll take your card, give you a card, and then take it back and get it to me as well. We're going to start with our first audience question, which is to all candidates. You'll have 90 seconds to respond, and we'll start with Mr. Soldati. And the first question is, are you in favor of regulations to address the short-term renting phenomenon that is driving up housing prices?
Thank you. So first, an important note, the Executive Council, for better or for worse, does not touch policy, wouldn't touch legislation, wouldn't veto it. So certainly would love to speak to the ways the Executive Council, through the Housing Authority, the Business Finance Authority, and some appointments could address the housing crisis that we have. That said, I still think it's worthwhile for you to get to know me and understand how I think about these issues. We know that we have 60,000 units less in the whole state of New Hampshire than we need to house our current population. And we recognize that shows up in a lot of different ways in a lot of different communities, including a lot of folks living in tents, which also then contributes to challenges around substance use and infectious disease if people don't have access to food security and clean laundry. So we need those 60,000 units. One of the things that has done is, because we have a local control system, is that large corporations like Airbnb have been able to access a really unfettered market. And some communities are leading on it, some communities are catching up on it. I do think it's important that local community members and full-time community members have a sense of how those communities have permanent residents and have, whether it's through allowing only short-term rentals that have owner-occupied or putting a cap on the number. I would in general support initiatives that allow residents that live here to support more housing.
Thank you. Dr. Marsh?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Like Emmett, I agree that the rise of short-term rentals has resulted in the loss of workforce housing in the town of Wolfeboro and other places around Carroll County. On my website, we've explicitly given some policy statements, but I support the idea that we need to give towns the tools they need to regulate short-term rentals, not prohibit them, but regulate them, so that they can be subjected to the same fire and safety rules, the same sanitation rules, the same noise regulations as other commercial establishments. Now, there probably needs to be some loopholes for owner-occupied ones. If you're renting out your in-law apartment for 2 weeks a year, that's not what the problem is. The problem is when entire neighborhoods become taken over and basically run as businesses. They should be on a level footing with the motels and hotels. And I very much support our allowing that to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Hewitt?
We absolutely have a supply problem. And here in Wolfeboro, I've chatted with many. And walking into carpenter school, there's a flyer right on the wall that says, "Are you homeless? Do you have a place to stay tonight?" So this is very much, housing is very much an issue. As far as the short-term housing, I wonder if it would be something that would be beneficial for voters to have their say in, especially in the communities that they live in. Is this something that voters could choose for their communities, and instead of it being a state sort of law? This is something I still need to learn more about. I have spoken with people of various opinions, but I'm just acknowledging it is an issue here, and short-term housing or rentals is part of that. I don't think taking it away completely is the only solution. Like Emmett said, we have a lot of, there's a lot of more need than just that too, so.
Thank you. Ms. Burnett Curry?
And don't know how many people here participated in the affordable housing charrette that was done recently in Ossipee. But this was a serious conversation amongst people with the idea of whether or not using some county land would reduce the cost of the housing proposed sufficiently to make it affordable. As it turned out, it was not sufficient because rural affordable housing is more complicated than urban affordable housing because you don't have the infrastructure there. You have to build the roads, you have to put in the sewage, you have to put in the water, and all that increases the cost of the affordable housing so that it's not affordable. So the question becomes, how do you address the problem in a rural setting? And how do you free up money that typically comes to the state or the state might have available so that it is more attractive for it to be used in a rural setting? Because right now it ends up being more attractive to use it in urban settings where you already have the infrastructure and we already have the concentrated population of housing. And we tend to have in rural, for example, if you're in a rural zone district, a 2 acre minimum. And right there, that increases the cost of affordable housing. So there's a lot of things that are local issues. They are decisions that should and will be made locally, and there are a few things the state can do to help facilitate that for towns.
Thank you. Ms. Budman?
I think we're building on each other here. There are three distinct issues that here in Wolfeboro we have to look at, but I'm also in a district with Wolfeboro, Tuftonboro, and Ossipee. So the number of shortage of houses right now is about 550 in the district where I would be representing. Short-term rentals, which is the original question, so I want to stay on it. We have to remember that we are in a community that is a resort community. Many of the families in our community have cottages that have been passed down for generations and generations. Many of these people need to make sure that they can rent out their cottage for a few weeks a year so they can have enough property taxes, enough money for their property taxes to pay their property taxes. One of the larger issues that we've seen in our area is our first homes, that sort of the homes that turn over quickly because they're smaller in square footage. 30 seconds, oh no. They're not turning over anymore because they're being built and they're being blown up. And so they're staying in families now for generations and generations. We have to get back to figuring out how we can house people who are coming into the market for the first time. So that's one issue we need to address. Just quickly at the state level, we cannot legislate Manchester the way we legislate Wolfeboro. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sinclair?
Yes, hi. I just want to point out that the problem of short-term rental properties is not something that the county commissioners will adjudicate on. That is a policy question. We do, however, I do, however, feel that I would applaud any way to shift the balance of housing dedicated to short-term rentals and non-resident owners towards people who live and work in our communities. I would applaud that. I also took part in the housing charrette, which was a discussion of the possibility of putting housing on some county land. It was certainly an interesting exercise. I do believe that part of the answer is also adding more housing supply in our market to alleviate some of the pressure. And that may indeed be a promising route forward. Again, the price point was a little high, but there may be ways to moderate that some, bring the price down so that housing really addresses the market segment that is most in need of finding affordable housing. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Dvorak?
Could you repeat the question because it's a little difficult to hear over here?
Yes, the question was, are you in favor of regulations to address the short-term renting phenomenon that is driving up housing prices?
Am I in favor of what? I'm sorry?
Are you in favor of regulations short-term renting phenomenon that is driving up housing.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, it's difficult to hear. Short answer is yes. I think we need regulation for short-term rental. They are technically commercial rentals. If they're less than 6 months, they are commercial rentals, and as such, they should be subject to commercial inspection. That being said, I will also say that I attended that housing charrette with all these other folks, and it was very informative and very educational. 3 nights of input and all kinds of information given out. One important item was that there is about a need for 25 housing units in Carroll County that are not there, and that is one of the reasons we have such a housing problem here. And just alone in Wolfeboro, it's my understanding we have 790 Airbnb rentals available. Those Airbnb rentals used to be, in many cases, apartment buildings that were available for long-term rental, but investors have chosen differently to use the properties, and that's their prerogative, but it also has made it very difficult for people to afford living here. I've been a landlord for 25 years. I've always kept my rents low. I've never gone the Airbnb route, and I will never do that. And I think it's cruel for those people who take a property that's, say, $700 a month, and all of a sudden it's $2,500 a month for the same property. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dragonfly?
I feel a little different about this than most everybody here. If you look around this room, there's probably not one of us under 55. Where are we going to live in 10 years? That's when all of their housing will be ready for us. If you're a homeless kid, we've got about 150 in Governor Wentworth Regional School District, high school alone. If you are one of those kids, where are you going to sleep tonight? How can we help you get through the night? How can we keep you warm and fed? That's what we need to be concentrating on. You know, Jeb Bradley said a year and a half ago that he was going to suggest $35 million in funding to eliminate the housing problem in Manchester. And I was down in Manchester giving out clothes that day to the homeless. And not one thing has happened with that thought that Jeb had that day, but he got lots of press and everybody thought the problem was fixed, but nothing has changed. I think we need to concentrate on now and then have another committee that concentrates on long term. Our kindergarten enrollment is going down every year, and we're forgetting our people today, but we're going to be in the same crisis 10 years and 20 years from now when all the baby boomers push through.
Thank you. All right. Our second question tonight has come in quite a few times, so I've tried to smush it into one question. So this is for all candidates. What is your stance on educational freedom accounts? How do you believe they will impact the quality of education for our students? And if you support educational freedom accounts, where will the funding come from? We'll start with Dr. Marsh.
Thank you. I'm going to divide the question. First of all, I very much support school choice. We homeschooled our children, and I'm proud of the fact that they all went on to competitive colleges. However, I do not support educational freedom accounts because educational freedom accounts is taking money out of the public schools. It's taking your tax dollars and giving it to private religious schools, and it has really hurt homeschooling. So therefore, I would oppose the continuation of this program. Frankly, it needs to be audited because there seems to be some issues with the people who've gotten the money. And the fact that the program has expanded from $107,000, I believe it was at first, to I believe it's supposed to be $66 million this year is something that every taxpayer should be shocked about. So I would not support continuing the program.
Thank you. Ms. Hewitt?
To echo, to echo what Dr. Marsh said, I support that we have school choice. I think it's great. Parents and guardians can choose to send their children to private schools, homeschool, charter. You have that option. What I don't agree with is when we take this funding from education freedom accounts and route it from our public schools to families who might be sending their children to private school anyway. We have issues within our local school district, and this is actually why I didn't mention this when I gave my little intro there, but I started caring because of education. I started going to the school board meetings. I've been going for over a year and a half, and this particular issue does really bother me. We have lead in our water in our schools across our district. We're remediating that, but that should have been fixed by now. We have teachers who aren't feeling heard because members on our House Education Committee aren't asking them what they need. They're not asking them, how do you feel about this piece of curriculum that we're going to make law that you have to teach? We have issues in our schools with, teachers needing support. And there's a lot of other ways that this money being pulled from our public education is going to harm the 2,100 students, actually it's close to 2,200 students in our district and their families. And that's my priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burnett Curry?
Well, I'm in line with the previous speakers. I'm not in support of education freedom accounts. It's one of the reasons why I think we've gone off track. We, as I mentioned before, have not met our constitutional obligation for funding education, and the last thing we need to be doing is spending money before we've met that obligation on other things. Now, I agree with choice, but I also believe that there's choice within our traditional public school system that most people don't recognize or acknowledge. And we should be using that discussion around choice, around how we include it in our traditional public schools, like our vocational technical program and a variety of other needs-based programs that we offer. I also believe that until you meet your constitutional obligation, you shouldn't be using money for other things, and this one is 40 years in the waiting. We've spent millions on lawsuits over this. We spent millions in trying to pass constitutional amendments so that it's not a state obligation. We've spent millions creating laws recently that then are unconstitutional, so then we change the law that makes them unconstitutional. There were 16 constitutional amendments proposed in the last session of the legislature. That's not how you run the state, in my estimation, for the purposes of education.
Thank you. Ms. Budman?
In 2021, Senate Bill 130 did not pass. And we did not have a voice. We didn't have a voice in the House, we didn't have a voice in the Senate, and we didn't have a governor that signed a bill into law. What we had was we had a bunch of legislators who did a rider bill, meaning they put it in our budget, and we never had a voice. We never had a vote. We are up to $44 million, and we are going to call them what they are. They are school vouchers. This is not an education freedom account as it's been rebranded. These are school vouchers with money laundering. We take our New Hampshire property taxes, our money, we send them to New York City. We send our money to New York City. The Children's Scholarship Fund takes 10% off the top. Then they send our money to Florida. Florida then takes money through Class Wallet, and then they give the money to the families where then they approve where the funds go. We have no right to audit our money. We have no right to know where our money's going. And that is not education freedom. That's taxation without representation.
Mr. Sinclair?
Yeah, again, this is an issue that probably will not be something the county commission will pass judgment on. We don't legislate. I do feel that the education freedom accounts are a waste of money. They're by and large subsidizing people to attend private schools who would already be doing so. And in doing that, they're funneling money away from our public schools, which provide a solid secular education available to all citizens. I think that's extremely important to support. I support that. I will point out that the county commission recently approved the sale of an old county courthouse in Ossipee to a right-wing charter school organization for $1, and I think that was that showed poor judgment in terms of not representing all of the residents of Carroll County, but being a politically motivated decision. That was done in a very untransparent way. So that's unfortunate. I will pledge to stay away from that kind of politically charged decision-making as county commissioner. So I think that was a mistake.
Mr. DeVork?
Thank you. As Wharton said, it's not really something that commissioners are likely to come up against, but as he mentioned, the North Star Academy was an issue. It went to a religious right-wing school, which has a specific agenda that doesn't necessarily meet the educational criteria of the state of New Hampshire. In my opinion, all of those alternative schools that are available should be required to have the minimum educational requirements for their educators that the state imposes on public schools, such as a master's degree in teaching. And I am appalled sometimes to hear that some of those educators in those schools are not even high school graduates. And so that, to me, is not responsible, and I don't know whether money should be going to that. It's my understanding that the state of New Hampshire only provides 5% of the state age education here, and that 5% is about to be whittled down more if we go that route of funding the vocational schools. And I would like to see more money spent on local schools and more focus on careers and guidance counselors for those students and anti-bullying concepts and things that might be apropos for students in the public schools right now. Thank you.
Ms. Dragonfly?
Once again, I come at this from a different angle. I was the one who got so outraged about the county courthouse being given away for $1 to a Christian curriculum that's going to have 5 kids that got not only 2 acres, our building, and $1 million from the state, but they're going to have 5 kids. Now, those same families could get the same exact word-for-word curriculum 3 miles down the street at the Christian Academy, who's been a good neighbor of ours for probably 20 years. But now we have this group coming in from Texas that is directly tied to Project 2025, and they're taking over our county. And it's happening in slow little chinks, so nobody really knows it's happening. But I think we need to wake up as commissioners and not just be giving, like, if they didn't know that 2 acres on town water and sewer was worth more than $1, then they don't deserve to maintain our $38 million budget for the whole county.
Thank you, and Mr. Soldati?
So New Hampshire is in last place in the country for state funding to public schools. And our Commissioner of Education, Frank Edelblut, wants to make that worse. He is the chief architect of the voucher program, and despite what you may have heard, it does not improve school choice. The vast majority of people that are receiving it were already sending their kids to private or religious schools, and he wants to increase the cap so that it's not for working families, but anyone can take advantage of it. And what's frustrating is most of your tax dollars, you have a say in them. You can go down to your school board or talk to the Board of Ed. You can't go to a private school, religious school, and take up issue with your money being spent. And the reality is, we were told it was only going to be $100,000. We are on track to take $50 million out of our state's public education budget. And the largest recipient so far has been Amazon.com. And Frank Edelblut was nominated and supported by my opponent twice. But Frank Edelblut's next nomination is up in March, and our next executive council will determine if we have a Department of Education that is responsible and respectful to your tax dollars and supporting public education. And if Frank Edelblut comes before my desk, I will absolutely reject his nomination.
Our next question, again to all candidates, is we are seeing an ever-increasing number of cyanobacteria events in the lakes. The town beaches were closed at times this summer. How will you address this problem moving forward? And we'll start with Ms. Hewitt.
This is a great question, and it's very important to all of us. It's important to all of our livelihood here. The lakes are a major source of income for our communities, and not just here, but the Lakes region and New Hampshire in general. I'm actually happy to say that I was brought into the board of the Wentworth Watershed Association this year. I care about our lakes. So the cyanobacteria blooms are happening because of the increase in phosphorus and nitrogen and these nutrients that are feeding cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is a naturally occurring bacteria, but our activity is generating more and more of these nutrients that are washing into the lakes from stormwater runoff, or if there's erosion at the shore. There's a lot of things that are important that we can all do. So I absolutely support legislation that would encourage the reduction of phosphorus. In fact, there's legislation on Governor Sununu vetoed a House bill recently. We still have until October 10th to ask him to overturn that, to limit the phosphorus that we use in our fertilizers and that is for sale, that people can use. That's one way that we could help, but I would support legislation that would maintain the quality of our lakes.
Thank you. Ms. Burnett Curry?
So I think you have to start with the fact that our governor announced, actually in Wakefield, not far from here, that cyanobacteria is not a toxin and that it's not an issue and that we're blowing it out of proportion. And so I think the first thing you have to do is have people who acknowledge the problem. I think it's similar to the fact that we have representatives now who don't acknowledge climate change. And if you want to look at a reason why you're having more cyanobacteria blooms besides the increase in phosphorus is the warming of temperature and the lack of ice over in the lakes and a lack of the turnover that usually takes place when you have the differences in temperature. There are a variety of things contributing to the problem, but if we don't acknowledge that it is a problem, that it is toxic, and that we are responsible for it, as we are responsible to a great extent over climate change, then we aren't going to find appropriate solutions, or we're not going to be able to pass them. I think that this is an example of where the blue wave is really necessary. If you don't have the blue wave, you will continue to have legislation that doesn't make it doesn't get passed and doesn't make it to the point where, whether it be PFAS or landfills or whatever, our legislators are now are not passing those protections.
Thank you. Ms. Budman?
Most of the people I met in this room, I met through Wentworth Watershed Association. Right when Wentworth Watershed Association started, Karen Burnett Curry actually was at Lake Wentworth Foundation before me. The great board came together and they created Wentworth Watershed Association. I was lucky to be there for the first 18 months. We held the first 2 water summits and the landscapers workshop. The landscapers workshop is probably one of the best things we did, because the majority of the phosphorus that is added is being added by people we're hiring to take care of our lawns, to take care of what we're doing. Our nutrient load, 50% of the phosphorus that gets into the lake is because of storm water runoff and what we are specifically doing, which leads back to what Kayla said. Governor Sununu vetoed Bill HB 1298. 30 seconds, got it. If every single person in this room contacts not only your legislators, but every legislator in that house, we have a real chance to override this veto. And by doing that, that is the number one thing that tonight, if you leave and do anything, it is go on and email representatives. If you go to my political page, Bobby Budman, on my Facebook page, I have the email address of every single legislator by county. Please email them. Please override that bill.
Thank you. Mr. Sinclair?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk long on this. The nutrient problem compounded with warmer temperatures is what's giving us cyanobacteria blooms. I think I will not have anything to do with policy decided in Concord, as these folks to my right will. But I also think we need to be open locally to embracing renewable energy, because it's our way in New Hampshire and in Carroll County to do our part at cleaning up our act on the emissions that are giving rise to climate change. So I firmly believe that. I hope that we can do something within our means and, responsible use of taxpayer money included to move in this direction. So that's where I see the role of people in Carroll County on the climate thing. Otherwise, really watching for runoff and educating people as to how to reduce their impact on our streams and lakes is where the money is on cyanobacteria.
Thank you. Mr. DeVork?
Thanks. Again, as Wharton said, we'd be commissioners not exactly involved with this issue, but one important thing to me as a resident here of many years is that the proliferation of waterfront homes has increased significantly, and with those homes there has been installations of fancy landscaping and also all kinds of fertilizers and growth, encouragement. The main issue to me is water runoff, and our own town of Wolfeboro has spray fields that they dispose of the sewage with tertiary treatment facilities, spraying treated sewage into the land, which then filters down into the ground and then ultimately becomes part of our water table. With the proliferation of the global warming and excessive flooding, excessive rains, there has not been enough filterage into the ground from that water, and I'm sure a lot of that water has filtered down into the lakes and the streams. It actually happened a few years ago with our rapid infiltration base in Wolfeboro, and that had to be changed. That major issue is, I think we should have inspections on shorefront property homeowner sewage systems at least every 2 years to make sure they're not leaking into the system, and also to make sure that commercial fertilizers aren't leaching into the lake from those properties. That's my viewpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dragonfly?
I think everybody's pretty much covered this lake issue. We all love the lake. We all know we make our money on the lake. It supports us all. We love it. I've never heard anybody say they don't like the lake. We got to fix it. We got to take care of it. It's like water coming out of our sink. We're not going to play with gross water. But I want to go back a little bit to Frank Edelblatt, who is the head of the Department of Education for the state of New Hampshire. His his degree is in theology. He homeschools his children. He knows nothing about education, but he does know Sununu. We've got to get rid of the guy. He's just spending millions and millions of dollars that are not going to our children. And the other thing that I am really liberal on, that I would like to see our money go to, and it's got nothing to do with anything here, but I think we should have health care from cradle to grave to include our eyes, teeth, ears, and our mental health. I think education funding is imperative. So that we don't continue to dumb down our students, because I don't want a dumb kid taking care of me when I'm old.
All right, Mr. Soldati?
Well said. So we have 5 executive counselors, and so that means there's 10 executive counselors currently running across the state. I am the only candidate, Democrat or Republican, that has been endorsed by the Sierra Club. And the reason is they recognize we need an environmental champion. Our district, which goes from Durham to the Canadian border and surrounds all of the lake communities on Winnipesaukee, it is so important that we have a candidate that is willing to stand up to corporate interests and exploitation, and also trust the scientists. I support the New Hampshire Lakes Association in their work and advocacy to keep your lakes healthy. My opponent has threatened to pull their funding. We actually saw the Lake Host program that they launched actually prevented Conway Lake from being infested by zebra mussels, which, you know, once they are invaded, you cannot get them out of your lakes. I think that's an important program. I also recognize that in our district includes Dalton up north, and they have Forest Lake. Currently, Casella Waste Management wants to site a landfill next to the lake where the leachate could actually filter into the lake. I think it is so important that we keep our lakes clean for us and our next generation, and that we also reject the lobbying of these corporate interests that often pervade our executive branch. And so I would reject any siting of new landfills in New Hampshire and would use the Executive Council position to protect our lakes.
Thank you, Emmett, and thank you to the House candidates. I agree with much of what was said. Like Emmett, I was endorsed by the Sierra Club, not just this cycle, but the previous cycle, and I'm proud of that. A couple things I want to add. We need to make sure that we emphasize not mitigation, but prevention. This problem is going to cost us a whole lot less to prevent it than to mitigate it. And in particular, we need to pass the wakeboat bill like the surrounding states so that our mitigation does not get ruined by a wakeboat stirring up the bottom and bringing the phosphorus back up to the surface. The second thing that I want to point out is we passed a law recently to require septic system inspections upon real estate transfers. That's a step in the right direction, but we all know that most of these shorefront properties don't transfer frequently. I wrote most of the health officers' laws a number of years ago. The definition of septic system failure in the health officers' law is leakage to the surface. It doesn't include the other two things, leakage into the groundwater and below mean high water. That is in the current law requiring inspections. We need to update those codes. We need to give enough support in DES and enough training of the health officers so that we use our existing law where health officers can inspect in septic systems and get a handle on this problem. I also would reintroduce the bill that's currently, hopefully will be overridden on the 10th, but if it isn't, we'll try again next time. Thank you very much.
Our fourth question of the night has again been mushed from a bunch of other questions that have all come from you tonight. So to keep it simple, each candidate, will you please share your position on women's reproductive rights? And we'll start with Ms. Burnett Curry.
Well, I am actually going to approach this from my grandmother's point of view. My grandmother, who was married in 1915, refused to say love, honor, and obey in her wedding.
Good for her.
All right. So she was a woman in some ways before her time. She would be rolling over in her grave right now, having worked for decades on women's suffrage and then working on women's rights. She would be appalled at the fact that we've in fact gone backwards in this respect. And we have even in New Hampshire, while we still have a 24-week abortion right, it is actually not encompassed in the same way as the surrounding states and could change at any moment. That's why they keep writing and trying to pass, the fetal heartbeat law or something. I am very much a believer in the fact that a woman should have the right to make decisions about her own life and her own body, and that these are all infringements on a woman's freedom and privacy, and they should not be allowed.
Thank you. Ms. Budman?
So again, in 2021, we had an abortion bill that was presented before the House and the Senate. It did not pass. So our representative put it in the budget as a rider bill. So that was in 2021. It did not have exceptions for fatal fetal anomalies. It also had criminal charges against doctors who had to help a woman after 24 weeks who was having a crisis pregnancy. So in 2022, there are two bills that were proposed. One was to take away the fact that women wouldn't be able to have an abortion after 24 weeks, even if they had a baby they wanted, if the baby had a fatal fetal anomaly. Glenn Cordelli voted against that. voted in favor that women would risk death over being able to abort their baby. He also failed another bill that charged doctors $100,000 if they help these women, and 3.5 to 7 years in prison. These are extreme measures that Mr. Cordelli is creating in our laws. They're extreme. They're not helping women, and they're helping women die. Thank you.
Mr. Sinclair?
Yes, again, this is an issue that the county commission will not be weighing in on, but I will personally say that I strongly believe that these decisions by women are healthcare decisions to be made between them and their doctors, and the state has absolutely no business getting involved in it. That is my personal belief.
Mr. DeVork?
Thank you. Yes, I would agree with Wharton. It's exactly the way I feel. Tim Walsh said it best, mind your own business. I think it should be between it should be between a woman and her doctor and the healthcare facilities, which, by the way, should be readily available in the state and not shut down. Planned Parenthood has suffered severe economic issues because of the lack of funding, even though they don't perform many abortions per se. They perform more health care than they do abortions. And it's despicable of the Republican Party to make this an issue of a political football, which I feel is absolutely none of their business. And it's just a political football. I'm sure a lot of them don't care, and I'm sure a lot of them could care less about women's rights. I don't know why, but to me, it's absolute sacrilege. And I think women should be allowed to make those choices themselves. Thank you.
Ms.
What
Dragonfly?
Dwight said. I would like to tell a little story. I was up at the Registry of Deeds looking up the courthouse deeds and who switched what, when, where. And I happened to go to the ladies' room, and they were charging 10 cents for tampons. 10 cents for a tampon. Does anybody get that? Do we charge you for toilet paper, sir? No. So until everybody can treat women the same as men, there's nothing to say about this. I didn't mean to pick on you.
Mr. Soldati?
In our next term, we will have 2 vacancies on the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And since the Dobbs decision in the fall of Roe, we know that state courts are where many issues around reproductive rights are going to be litigated. Not only abortions, but also mifepristone and other birth control measures, and even things like IVF. And if you are wondering the types of judges that Kelly Ayotte would nominate to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, we have her track record when she brought Neil Gorsuch through the Senate judiciary process and got him appointed onto the U.S. Supreme Court so that he could overturn Roe. We absolutely need an executive council that is going to vet judicial nominations for our Supreme Court that will protect a woman's right to choose and bodily autonomy and our civil liberties. We also know that the executive council is responsible for funding health care, including reproductive health care. There are only 3 centers in the state you can get an abortion. They are not in Carroll County, they're not in Belknap County, or Coos County, or Stratford County. If someone gets pregnant here, they'd have to travel an hour to an hour and a half to access an abortion. And even with that limited access, my opponent has defunded Planned Parenthood every single time it has gone on his desk for all 5 terms that he has been in office. I think in order to protect reproductive rights, we need to safeguard reproductive access. And that means strengthening the legitimate reproductive health care centers. And I'm endorsed by Planned Parenthood because I believe we need to fund access to reproductive health care to secure reproductive freedoms for granted staters.
Dr. Marsh?
Thank you, Emmett. I want to say that I'm pro-choice, and like Emmett, I'm endorsed by Planned Parenthood, and I'm proud of that fact. What I would like to emphasize that other people have not is that we're missing some of the unintended consequences of this fight. I was talking to a woman in Milton today whose Norplant implant has been in place 2 years longer than it ought to be, and she's at risk, an increased risk for certain kinds of cancers because she cannot find a place to get it removed. And that is a consequence of the lack of centers, just like Emmett was saying, where people could get reproductive care in years past. So we need to fix this problem.
Thank you. Ms. Hewitt?
I first just want to say thank you to everybody up here because it's really wonderful to sit here as a woman and know that all of you support my rights. So thank you. We have 4 daughters. I have a background that I won't get into with how we began our marriage in a very specific, religious, strict sort of way. I know what it's like to not use birth control because you believe it is wrong. I know what happens as a mother when you have a child who you love so much and you're like, whoa, I wasn't quite ready for this, but we were ready. But we weren't, you're never fully ready, I suppose. But anyway, we've been through some things. We've done a 180. I absolutely support all of our rights to choose what happens to and what happens within our bodies. And it's because I love all of you, everyone here. I love my daughters, and I finally am able to also love myself. Thank you.
So this question is going to be just for the candidates running for county commissioner. Do you plan to promote any changes to existing taxes and explain if why or why not? And we'll start with Mr. Sinkler.
Sorry, changes to what?
Taxes.
Taxes.
The county share of the taxes.
County share of taxes. The county share of taxes is basically adjusted in order to cover the expenses of the county, which are about $40 million currently per year. I think the only way to reduce the share of taxes would be to reduce the budget of the county. I would say to do that, you would need to probably compromise on services, but maybe not. I think the main thing is this is a management position. I have not yet been in the position of managing these facilities. I have not drilled down to the bottom on all of the budgetary questions for the jail, for the courthouse, for all of the different departments of the county. So I think, honestly, that journey is ahead of me in terms of how I would, try to save money for the county. So I don't have very specific proposals for ways to do this, aside from the really serious loss of money that's going on right now due to agency staffing at Mountain View Home, which is an obvious area that needs a lot of attention. I would like to save Carroll County money if I can, but I don't have anything more specific to say about it, having not, as I said, done the legwork that's needed to make those decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Dvorak?
Repeat the question, please.
Do you plan to promote any changes to existing taxes?
And what, say again?
Existing taxes?
To reduce. Okay, thank you. I don't have any immediate assumptions that taxes can be cut, but I will say I am a Yankee at heart. I'm frugal. I've learned to evaluate every budget line item of every budget I ever looked at and decide whether it's prudent or not. Some of the things that I see just walking around the facility at the Carroll County facility, little things that come to mind, for example, pallets of Poland Spring water sitting in the annex building, which, as we all know, is the most expensive water you can buy. Why are we buying Poland Spring bottled water, for example? That's just a small example. I think we should be looking at the internal cost of every part of the administration of all the county buildings and see where we can save. I'm definitely a proponent of solar energy. I have it at my house. I agree with Wharton. I think we could make great inroads in saving energy with just solar and perhaps wind energy supplementing that. And any kind of conservation efforts are the most important. We don't want to cut services. Nobody wants them cut. So the main issue is how do we prevent tax increases? Not if we can reduce them, great. But if we can prevent them, that's even acceptable to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Dragonfly?
The whole housing thing, I see more as a minimum wage issue. We only pay $7.25 an hour for minimum wage. You'd have to have, I think, 6 people working 40 hours a week to be able to find half a house in Wolfeboro. It's crazy money. But some of the ideas that I have thought of is that we could rent some of our county land. We have 818 acres that could be utilized for something else, and it would probably also do the land good too if we kept it moving. One thing I wanted to say, I'm jumping all around, but I think it was Emmett that mentioned that there were only 3 places in New Hampshire where women could get health care. And one of them is the Lovering Health Care Center down in Greenfield or Greenland, I don't know, one of those green places. And that Lovering Health Care system was named after Joan Lovering, who is right from our town, and I'm very proud of that. But there are a lot of things we can do, but we got to get rid of the commissioners that don't know how to manage money, that think they're going to get money from 10-cent tampons, but they don't. I want to see it on the budget where they bought them. I want to see them, how much they're gathered, and maybe we can figure out a way to save money there.
Thank you. This question is going to be the last question of the night. Again, if any of the questions you provided weren't asked, we're going to provide a list of the questions to the candidates, all the candidates, and they can address them as they see fit. But the last question is to all candidates, and the question is, marijuana is legalized in 24 states, including neighboring states like Maine and Massachusetts. What is your position on legalizing marijuana? And we're going to start with Ms. Budman.
Due to the fact that the states around us have legalized cannabis, it is forcing an illegal flow, a black market here, to our area. Due to that, our children are getting cannabis that is laced with fentanyl, laced with other things. It is a delicate balance whether we are going to move forward with having the state fund cannabis stores like we do our liquor stores, or if we are going to open this market up to a free market. I will tell you personally, I do not feel that this should be a free market enterprise. I don't think that many of us want to drive up the road and see a cannabis shop on every corner. Part of that worries me is that when you look at Maine and you look at Vermont and you look at Massachusetts, we now have licensed people who are giving medical cards to 18-year-olds. 18-year-olds can walk into these cannabis shops. They are buying for themselves and they're buying for their peers. And there is a serious problem on that end of it too. So if we legalize this, it is going to take a concerted effort to make sure our children are still protected.
Mr. Sinclair?
Yeah, again, this is not a county commission issue really, but from my personal perspective, I'm pretty ambivalent about the idea of legalizing marijuana for sale in New Hampshire. I think I have a lot of concern about younger people. You know, if you're sending them the message that all of a sudden this drug is okay, I'm not sure it's really a positive thing for our youth to have a lot of access to cannabis. And I don't think we should be throwing people in jail for long prison terms for cannabis possession, on the other hand. That certainly isn't really the case anymore in this, at least not that I'm aware of in this state. And I think we have plenty of availability of cannabis from the neighboring states. Maybe that's good enough at this point. So that would be my personal perspective, would be to not be in favor of rocking the boat and making a big new effort to legalize marijuana in New Hampshire.
Thank you. Mr. DeVork?
Okay. Thank you. Well, there is definitely a difference of opinion on the board here. of the candidates. I personally am in favor of total legalization for recreational use of marijuana. I think it's absolutely hypocritical for this state not to do it. There are many people that have already indicated well over 70% that they would like to see it legalized in this state. It's pathetic. The bills that have come before the Senate and the House already to legalize it, and the methods they've gone about suggesting legalization by putting it under the guise of the Liquor Commission and having licenses sent out to qualifying people to have marijuana shops. The last reiteration of that bill was that there would be 15 licenses granted in New Hampshire with a total of maximum of 3 per license. So technically 5 people could have all 15 licenses, which was kind of monopolistic and also anti-freedom. I think with the surrounding states showing what they're doing with the legalization, there has not been an indication of problems with children, and also it is supposed to be illegal under 18, just as cigarettes, and so there should not be an issue of children getting access. If they do, it's not because of the stores, it's not because of anything but bad regulation with families and distribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dragonfly?
There's little doubt that I'm an advocate for marijuana. I hear little giggles. Marijuana is less problematic than alcohol. And if our kids are going to get cannabis, they're going to get alcohol. And part of the big problem is, first of all, there's 36 states that are now legal, not 24. But a big part of the problem is that marijuana needs to be grown somewhere, and it can't move over state lines. So that creates a problem. The state of New Hampshire would be having to grow the cannabis. And that's not something that people have talked about or have been able to figure out. Recreational cannabis is tested far more than medical cannabis, because with medical cannabis, they figure you've got a doctor involved. So recreational cannabis is over-tested. But the big thing that I keep saying is that Vermont, Maine, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Mass, New Jersey, New York, all the way down to Washington, D.C., and all of Canada is all legal. And we are losing millions and millions and millions of dollars in tax money that we could be putting towards these schools and health care that we desperately need to create a healthy, smart population.
Thank you. Mr. Soldati?
Yeah, so I live down in Somersworth on the Maine border, and you might forget that we don't have legal cannabis if you live anywhere near a border town. And the reality is, although the Executive Council will not touch policy, I support legal cannabis. I think we are leaving a lot of revenue on the table and sending to other states. As a member of the recovery community, it is actually important to recognize that prohibition has never worked to reduce harms in recovery, and all it has done is criminalize particularly people of color and criminalize poverty. So it's a criminal rights issue, it's a revenue issue, and that I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. If we legalize it, we actually can control who gets access to it better. One of the benefits of vote always being last in New Hampshire is we have so many other states to look to see how they have solved some of these problems to make sure that cannabis stores don't proliferate anywhere. They've had limited number of licenses that they provide, limited, certain distance from school buildings and so forth. So I think it's time our legislature got hip with what the vast majority of Granite Staters want, which is to legalize cannabis and do it responsibly and effectively. And I hope the next legislature does take that up.
Thank you. Dr. Marsh?
Thank you. Prohibition did not work in the 1930s, and it doesn't work now. We need to legalize cannabis. 70% of our people say that we need to do that, and I agree with them. However, when we do it, we need to do it right. When I was in the State House, I passed a bill that required the alternative treatment centers to create posters and pamphlets about the things the Surgeon General of the United States was worried about: cannabis use during pregnancy, cannabis use during adolescence, and adolescent poisoning. and accidental poisoning. The reason we did this was so that when we legalize cannabis, and eventually we will, we have all the materials right now ready so that they can be present wherever cannabis is sold. So yes, we need to legalize cannabis, we need to do it responsibly, and we need to pay attention to public health. Thank you.
Ms. Hewitt?
I'm not opposed to this, to legalizing cannabis. Honestly, with a similar sentiment to my last answer, I support your right to choose what happens to and within your body in regards to cannabis specifically as well. However, as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else. So I do have some concerns where, Mr. Sinkler and Ms. Budman mentioned with children and all of that, but we also know that restricting isn't going to solve the problems that do exist. But overall, I just think this is a good conversation to have. In what ways could it work for us? I think this is just a conversation I'm willing to have and hear all sides, but I'm not opposed to legalization.
Thanks. And Ms. Burnett Curry?
I'm kind of amazed that New Hampshire hasn't already legalized, because we're so good at sin taxes, and we always are looking for ways to get money without calling it a broad-based tax or something else that's going to pinch somebody's pocket. So puts it in the category of the lottery and liquor and tobacco and all those other things. I'm really surprised we haven't capitalized on this particular source of income for the state. I have no issues with I'm all for legalizing marijuana. I think the present system costs us money rather than producing money for us. It causes as much trouble for us as the problems that might be created through legalization. I will say that as far as youth are concerned, we've all lived through the changes in the drinking age, and we've all lived through changes in vaping and how that's come and declined. And we address those issues through education and modification of how you have access to it and a variety of other things which all can be used in the context of marijuana. And so I believe that it should be, rather than, I'm done.
All right, to conclude tonight's event, I want to thank the candidates, the audience members here and watching us, the volunteers and the organizations involved in tonight's event. We have a special thank you to Mr. Myers and the Kingswood High School students who helped this event run smoothly. Thank you to those who have taken time from their day to help organize and ensure the success of tonight's event. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you.